very excited to get into this word with you guys this morning. Pastor Jason asked me to speak. Obviously, I said yes. I can't tell him no for anything in the world. He's called me many times and been like, hey, we have to run this errand, and we're going to go to St. Albans, and we're going to be there all day long, and you're going to work your guts out, and then we'll stop at Wendy's. I'm like, yeah, sounds like a blast. So when he asked me to speak, obviously I said yes. When I was studying for this, I couldn't stop thinking about Matthew chapter 25, and it's verses 14 through 30. It's the parable of the three servants. And I started reading, and when I started, I read the message once, and I was like, okay, I don't know why I'm here in this, particular chapter, but I feel like this is what, God's speaking to me. And so I read it again, and then I read it again, and I was like, oh, man, I don't know. So I just put it down. I was like, maybe tomorrow. So I pick it back up the next day, and I'm reading it, and I'm reading it, and I'm reading it. And finally, I got the whole point of my message today. And if you're taking notes, my message is titled, Well Done. Also, huge shout out to Jim for that graphic. That was so cool. But we all covet those 7 words. We all look forward to hearing those words at the end of the line, right? Well done, my good and faithful servant. That's like Christianity 101. Like first day, they're like, all right, step 1, love Jesus. Step 2, eventually one day you'll hear those words if you do it right. And so I was reading this story. Everybody knows the story. If you don't, there's 3 servants. Each one's given a certain amount of money because the master's going on a trip. He comes back, and the 2 that have the most money double what they were given and give it back to the master. And the last one had hid the money and brings back exactly what he was given. And so the master takes the money from him and gives it to the other ones. But that's not at all what I got out of this story, to be honest. So what I got out of this is the master looks at 2 of the 3 and says, well done, my good and faithful servants. And I think every day when we lay our heads down, someone, whether it's the creator of the universe or the enemy, someone is looking down and going, well done today. And, I said the same thing, Jimmy. When God kind of pointed that out to me, it kind of gut punched me. I was like, man, that's rough. Because at some point, I have bad days. I don't know about you guys, but since the day I got saved, I have not been perfect at all. And, I know looking back now that there's some days where the devil has been able to look at the summary of my day and go, well done. And I love getting to preach. I love getting to talk to my teenagers. And it's a little bit easier than talking to you guys, mainly because they think I know everything. And what they don't know that I don't know, they don't know, if that makes sense. I'm going to make a mess. But it's a lot easier to talk to them because I've walked in their shoes. I've made the mistakes they've made, for the most part. So I can tell them, this is something you shouldn't do. This is something you should stay away from. These are the kind of people you should stay away from. And it's easier, but now that I get to teach the big kid or mature class, I haven't done all the things you guys have done. I mean, Brandon probably has stories he could tell all day, and Jimmy has stories he could tell all day. The list goes on. But, just because we get saved doesn't mean everything just turns into rainbows and butterflies. If anything, it gets harder. I feel like especially nowadays, Christians are put under a microscope. Not that that's a bad thing. It is what it is, but when we get saved, it does not equal perfection. We get closer to Jesus, but at that very moment, we don't become just like Jesus, if that makes sense. But I want to get back to who gave the well done. And I was writing this message, and I was thinking, what I wrote this down. It says somebody got your blank today, and you can fill in the blank with your attention. Someone got your thoughts. Someone got your time. Someone got your words. Someone got your energy. Me and Landon and Adam have been best friends for, 7-ish years? I mean, Landon, obviously, since the day he was born. I can't get away from him. But there's days where we'll text each other and be like, man, today sucked. Today was horrible. I had to put all my energy into X, Y, and Z today. It was horrible. Or I had to, give all my time to this. Or I had to, I thought about this all day long, and it ruined everything I had planned. And not to call out our youth kids, but, they'll tell me the same thing. They're like, man, I had a rough week. All I could think about was this, and this. Or, all I can do this week is this, and I don't have time for this. And one thing I'll bring up that I am not a fan of, but the kids love it, is travel baseball. Travel baseball is a cult. I love that the kids play sports, but travel baseball, you have to be 110%. There's not missing a day. One, because your parents paid who knows how much money for you to be there. And two, if you want to play, you have to be there. That's just 1 + 1 = 2. So I cannot stand travel baseball. I was never a baseball player, obviously. I'm not built like a baseball player unless I was the backstop. But that's something that could take all of your attention if you let it. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to take your attention, but if it's taking you away from the Lord or work, I mean, how many people clock in at work and they're like, now start time to start thinking about work. And then you clock out and you're like, okay, we're done thinking about work today. It's over. And you're done. That doesn't happen, right? I know from working in corrections for almost 3 years, I would come home and immediately start telling Cherith about such and such inmates. And she's like, I don't care. It's 11 o'clock and I couldn't care less about the inmate that you got into a fight with. I don't care. You're in one piece, you're home, period. So, on days that would get your thoughts. That would get my thoughts. That would get my energy. If you're following along in your Bible, I will go ahead and read verse 21 of Matthew 25. It says, the master was full of praise. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. Now we're going to be in 2 Corinthians. Chapter 5, verse 10. That verse says, for we all must stand before Christ to be judged. We will each receive whatever we deserve for the good or evil we have done in this earthly body. So no matter what, whether you are in the church every time the doors are unlocked, or you're out doing the most outlandish things on the planet, no matter what, we will stand one at a time, not with anybody, one-on-one in front of the judgment seat, period. That is promised. That is written in Scripture. No matter what you do or where you are or how you do it, at that day and time that is destined for you, you will stand in front of the judgment seat. And we will get not what we think we deserve. Because everybody thinks they deserve the world, right? Or maybe you don't think you deserve the world. Every single one of us will get what God says we deserve at the end of that time. But what if you had someone checking in on you daily? Like I said before, what if God is looking down and going, man, Jimmy killed it today. He did a great job. Or what if, I'll pick on Landon because I can. What if the devil looks at Landon and goes, you lost your temper with 3 people at work today. That was sick. You made a complete fool of yourself, and it was awesome. Well done. What if that happens every night when you lay your head down? What if it does impact someone as much as you think it doesn't? I always try to tell my kids when we leave on either a Sunday morning or a Wednesday night, be good to people because you might be the only Jesus that person ever sees. And especially nowadays, with the way high schools are and the way middle schools are, they're horrible. And I told them that Wednesday, I was like, you guys have to do so much more than I had to do. Like, I feel old when I say this, but it's nowhere close to what it was when I was in high school. I graduated 9 years ago. Easy, Adam. I graduated 9 years ago, and the way the schools have changed from then to now is insane. So I always try to tell the kids to be Jesus for somebody this week. And I'm not saying physically become Jesus, and I'm not trying to get crazy, but just show the love of Jesus. Because at the end of the day, the Lord will look down and go, well done. You were nice to him, now he's having a better day. Or you were nice to him and he knew he had to go home to X, Y, and Z situation. Or you were nice to her and now she doesn't have to sit by herself at lunch every day. It's the little things that mean the most. I really try to push that on them, and I know I get on their nerves sometimes, but every time we depart, I pray that God would put someone in our path that needs to see his love. Because what else is the point of doing all this if we're not sharing what we have? If I walked into church with a big sheet cake and it just had icing and candles and candy, and I walk up to Haley, I'm like, Haley, did you see all my cake? And she's like, yeah, it looks great. I'm like, sure does. And I just turn around and walk away. Yeah, she's not going to like it. If I walk in and say, Haley, did you see all this cake? It looks amazing. It's from Tipton's. It's 10 out of 10, best in the area. And she's like, yeah, it looks great. And I'm like, would you like some? Right? That makes people happy. Cake makes people happy for the most part. Well, Jesus is the same way. He will make people happy, and he's happier with us when we share what we're given, right? What I wanted to really pinpoint this morning is who is giving you your well done? Who is looking at you and going, nice. That was a solid day. That was a good win for our team. Now, whose team are you on? What is keeping you from walking in what God has planned for your life? Is it work? Is it extracurriculars? Is it you know, family stuff. That all that stuff can be resolved. It can all be fixed. I mean, Cherith and I'll go ahead and share our not dirty laundry, but we in the situations that we put ourselves in with careers, at no time should we ever be able to be paying our bills, honestly. Like, if Doug's a math guy, Doug and my dad, they're math guys. If you were to sit down with the numbers from October 17th of 2020, the day we got married, to this morning, and you crunch the numbers and then you crunch our bills, 100% chance you'd be like, how are you not living in a box? It shouldn't make sense. But we have been so blessed, and God has put us in so many situations and opportunities to be blessed and to bless other people that it works. And, not bragging on us at all. This is nothing we did. But just the way that God has poured into us and the way that God has used other people to pour into us is just unexplainable. So I say that to say, what is keeping you from what God has for you this morning? If you will turn to 1 Corinthians. Youth, if you're following, that's back this way. We're in second. You got to go to the first. Something that Pastor Jason does that I love is he asks everyone to stand. So I know we're a little late, and he does that first, but if you'll stand, if you're not too comfortable, we'll read this verse together. It says, "So my dear brothers and sisters, be strong and immovable. Always work enthusiastically for the Lord, for you know that nothing you do for the Lord is ever useless." You can be seated. So he tells us right here in 1 Corinthians, he tells us, nothing you're doing is useless. And I promise, from an old youth kid's perspective, I can promise you that's the truth. So many people in this church have poured into me over the years. Kenny, he's always been a great influence in my life, being my uncle. Uncle Dave let me kind of step on his toes playing bass. If you don't know Uncle Dave, he loves two things, and they're spelled the same, but they're pronounced different: bass and bass. That is Uncle Dave to a T. And for Uncle Dave to say, okay, yeah, I'll let this kid, because at the time I was 16, I'll let this kid play every couple of weeks. That's huge. So thank you, Uncle Dave. Obviously, Pastor Jason. There's so many people I can name. We'd be here all day. But what you're doing is not in vain. Haley, what you do every single Sunday morning is not in vain. You are here with a purpose, for a purpose. And, the greeters and ushers and prayer team, everyone that has a part, or if you literally just come in, you sit down, you hear the message, you get up and you go tell somebody about it. What you're doing matters just as much, if not more, than what me and Pastor Jason are doing right here. You don't have to have a title to hold value in the kingdom. You don't. And, I think that's something that always gets misconstrued is, oh, well, yeah, I go to this church, but here's our pastor. Talk to him about Scripture. Or, yeah, I go to this church, but our worship team's great. You should really go talk to Haley about them. She knows all about them. No, you should know all about them. You stand facing us every Sunday. I'm up here almost every week. I see your faces. So it's not just because Dave plays the guitar doesn't mean Dave's the only one that can talk about the worship team. Everything we do has a purpose, whether you're in the nursery or cameras. I went on the list and added to it, but everything we do for the kingdom matters. Everything. So I just wanted to reassure you this morning, and this message wasn't to call you out about who's giving you your well done, but to do a self-assessment, to kind of get that gut check that the Lord gave me, because that's how we live our best life. That's how we move on into the next life, is by checking each other. Landon does a great job of checking me. We've always done that. Cherith has mastered it. I mean, some would say she should start teaching a class. But, I know in Adam, Haley does the same thing for Adam. And, Kayla for Brandon. I know Brandon's a lot. You got to reel him in sometimes. Yeah. But it's always better when you can have other people that are like, hey, man, wake up. You're sleepwalking. You're just getting through the days. And, I've been guilty of that, even as a youth pastor, especially as a youth pastor. Some Wednesdays, honestly, I just don't feel like it. But I made a commitment to this church and to Pastor Jason and to these kids. They're going to hear something, period. They have to. So stand firm. He says it right there. It says, always work enthusiastically for the Lord. Doesn't say, always just get the job done. No one cares how. That's not true at all. They do care how. Cherith tells me all the time. And not to badger Cherith that she badgers me, but I need this correction constantly. She told me the other day, she's like, you're just kind of complaining too much. And I was. 100% I was. I thought I had a Saturday to myself to relax. And instead, I moved 2 couches, 2 recliners, and a sectional. Because she wanted it. So I was complaining too much, 100%. I'll call myself out. Shane can vouch for it. He was there. He heard every word. He actually heard more than Cherith because he rode in the truck with me. So, that's not biblical. That's when I needed checked. And she took no time to check me. None. I think I was in the middle of a sentence, actually. But that's what I married her for. So it says, do the work enthusiastically, for nothing you do for the Lord is ever useless. So whatever you're doing, whether you work in construction or the medical field, or you're a teacher, or I don't know, you work at Moe's, like Hayden, whatever you're doing, if you're doing it for the Lord, if you're doing it for the kingdom, then it's worth it, period. Now, did I think when I worked at the movies at 18, sweeping up popcorn after people when they got done in the movie, did I think that was for the kingdom? Absolutely not. But I made lots of friends there, and I was able to invite people to church, and I was able to maybe play a small part in someone's walk with the Lord. That is worth it. That's what made working at the movies as a teenager worth it. If you feel this morning like you're only hearing one voice saying well done over and over, and it's not the Lord, if you don't have a relationship with the Lord, I invite you to just run up here right now. Don't think twice about it. Every person in here has been in the position that you're in. every person in here is on that walk somewhere. You know, they might be a step or two ahead of you, or right next to you, or 15 steps, but they are on that same walk. So if you guys will go ahead and bow your heads,